What happened to Prince William that made Catherine break down in tears? Why did the palace release an emergency statement at dawn? And how did this one night change everything for the royal family? Stay with me, because what unfolded behind those palace walls is more heartbreaking than anyone could imagine. And if you want to stay updated on the most emotional and real stories from the royal family, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of truth from behind the crown. Britain opened its eyes this morning to complete silence, a silence that carried sadness in every corner. The clock struck exactly 6:40 in the morning on October 24, 2025, when the palace press office dropped news that would shake the entire nation. The royal family announced that Prince William was rushed to the hospital overnight after a serious health emergency. Just those few words, delivered without any warning, stopped the whole country in shock. People gathered outside Kensington Palace as the morning light began to spread. Phones were shaking in people's hands. Camera flashes cut through the foggy morning air. And somewhere behind those tall stone walls, Princess Catherine was spotted stepping out of a black car, her eyes swollen red, her lips pressed tight, fighting back tears. For years, everyone had watched William as the calm and steady future of the monarchy, the man who would wear the crown one day with strength and grace. But now, that same man who represented Britain's future was lying in a private hospital room at King Edward VII Hospital in the heart of London. What went wrong? Was it exhaustion? Was it stress? Or was it something far more dangerous? The palace gave almost no details, only saying that the prince was under close watch by doctors. By mid-morning, every single major news station, BBC, Sky News, CNN, was running the same breaking headline: tragic news about Prince William. Flags at government buildings were lowered halfway. Even though officials later said it was for a different reason, everyone knew the truth. The country was holding its breath, waiting. At 10:05 in the morning, Catherine appeared again at the hospital entrance. Cameras clicked wildly, but she couldn't say a word. Her voice broke before she could even speak. All she managed was a whisper, "Thank you," before turning away, wiping her tears. That clip played on every screen across Britain for the next 24 hours, the moment that told the world this wasn't just another royal update. Something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. But what really happened inside that hospital room? What caused this sudden collapse? And how will this change the royal family forever? Keep watching, because the truth behind that tragic morning runs deeper than anyone ever imagined. Can a family that seems so strong really fall apart in just one night? The real story of that heartbreaking morning actually started the night before a night that nobody inside the royal household will ever forget. On October 23, 2025, the lights at Adelaide Cottage stayed on much later than usual. Staff members whispered that the prince had been restless the entire week, rushing from one official event to another, attending late-night meetings, and preparing speeches for an environmental summit scheduled in Edinburgh. He insisted on writing his speeches himself, even though everyone could see he was exhausted. One palace assistant told The Times earlier this month, "He doesn't know how to stop. He thinks slowing down means failing." Then, at 2:47 in the morning, everything changed. An urgent call went out from Windsor to the Royal Medical Team in London. Security footage later showed a group of unmarked vehicles quietly leaving Adelaide Cottage at 3:05 a.m. lights turned off, moving quickly through the thick fog. The Prince of Wales was inside, pale and barely moving, his breathing slow and shallow. Catherine sat beside him the entire drive, holding his hand tightly, never letting go. When they arrived at King Edward VII Hospital, a private medical facility long trusted by the royal family, doctors acted immediately. They demanded complete privacy: no visitors, no cameras, no leaks to the press. By 4:20 in the morning, the palace switchboard was alerted, and two words echoed through every secure phone line: medical emergency. At Sandringham, King Charles woke up almost instantly. Sources close to the royal household say he had barely slept for days, already worried about his son's overwhelming schedule. "Get me his doctor," he told his staff. "Right now." Camilla, sitting beside him in the dark, placed a gentle hand on his arm but said nothing. Sometimes even love runs out of words. Meanwhile, back in Windsor, the couple's 3 children were still asleep, completely unaware that the quiet night outside their windows was filled with sirens and urgent whispers. Catherine made a shocking decision that even senior staff couldn't believe. She refused to wake the children. "They deserve one last peaceful night," she said softly, her voice steady despite everything falling apart around her. By 5 in the morning, Downing Street had been informed. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, postponed a scheduled meeting and placed a private call to the palace. His office later called it a courtesy check-in, but insiders say it was far more urgent. There was talk of backup plans, of what happens next, the kind of language saved only for the worst possibilities. In those early morning hours, as London slept, small details painted a heartbreaking picture. A cup of tea sat untouched beside William's desk at Kensington Palace. His laptop was still open to a draft speech titled, "The Strength to Endure." That file, staff members said, had been updated the night before at 10:42 p.m., just 3 hours before the emergency call went out. By sunrise, Clarence House was surrounded by reporters. Cameras pointed at every car that passed, desperate for any confirmation. Inside, palace officials carefully wrote the statement that would soon reach every corner of the world. At exactly 6:40 in the morning, the official announcement went public. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, was admitted to hospital overnight following a serious health episode. He remains under close medical supervision. Behind those carefully chosen words lay panic, exhaustion, and fear. Within minutes, BBC and Sky News interrupted their regular programs, cutting to live helicopter shots of the hospital rooftop. The royal press team switched into crisis mode, with every single word of every update reviewed by 3 different people, then read aloud twice before being released. Nobody wanted another communication disaster. For the staff inside King Edward VII Hospital, the atmosphere was deeply quiet and tense. Nurses moved softly through the hallways. Only the hum of medical machines filled the silence. Catherine stayed by her husband's side, refusing to leave, even when doctors begged her to rest. "He's always been my calm," she reportedly whispered to a nurse. "Now I have to be his." At 6:38 in the morning, the first ambulance siren of the day echoed through Marylebone, marking the start of another ordinary London morning. But for the royal family, the night had changed everything forever. It was the moment when royal duty gave way to human vulnerability, when the crown's next heir became simply a man fighting to hold on. And by the time the world heard the news, the palace was already preparing for something far more complicated than just a medical update. If this was your family, would you have made the same choices Catherine did that night? By sunrise, a cold silence hung over London, not the peaceful kind, but the kind born from fear. The streets around King Edward VII Hospital filled quickly with reporters, tourists, and local people clutching coffee cups, all staring up at the tall white building as if waiting for some kind of sign. Nobody spoke louder than a whisper. They were all waiting for Catherine. At 7:42 in the morning, the hospital doors opened, and there she was, the Princess of Wales, wrapped tightly in a navy blue coat, her hair pulled back neatly, her face impossible to read. She walked past the cameras without saying a single word, escorted by 2 security officers on either side. But the moment she reached the hospital entrance, one photographer captured the image that would travel around the entire world. Catherine pausing briefly, her hand covering her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Within minutes, that photo was everywhere. Catherine breaks in tears. It wasn't planned. It wasn't staged. It was pure exhaustion, fear, and love crashing together in one heartbreaking second. Inside the hospital, the hallways were filled with the quiet hum of machines and whispered conversations between doctors and nurses. The medical team had finally stabilized William's condition. "After several long hours of treatment, he's resting," one of the doctors told Catherine gently. "He's stable, but it was very close." Catherine's strength cracked for just a moment, long enough for her knees to weaken before she steadied herself again. She asked to see him immediately, and when she finally entered the room, her entire world seemed to freeze. William lay there, pale but peaceful, surrounded by beeping monitors. The same man who had spent years keeping everyone else steady now lay completely still. She reached for his hand, whispering words that only he could hear. "You promised we'd grow old together," she murmured softly. "Don't you dare go somewhere I can't follow." Outside the hospital, the press continued their watch. BBC interrupted its regular programming, running the bold headline, "Prince William hospitalized. Nation in shock." Crowds gathered with flowers and candles, turning the sidewalk into an unplanned memorial. Some prayed out loud. Others simply stood there, looking completely lost. "He's always been the steady one," an older man told a Sky News reporter. "If he's down, what happens to the rest of us?" Meanwhile, at Kensington Palace, staff members rushed to handle a flood of phone calls pouring in from around the world. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were kept at home under the care of Catherine's mother, Carol Middleton. The children were told only that, "Daddy needs rest." George, always so much like his father, reportedly asked, "Can I write him a note?" That note, a small folded piece of paper with the words, "Get better soon. We need you," was hand-delivered by palace security to the hospital that same afternoon. Inside Buckingham Palace, the royal household was on full alert mode. King Charles received updates every single hour, pacing the long hallways of Sandringham House, his face tight with worry and fear. Camilla tried her best to stay calm but admitted to staff that the family cannot bear another loss. Nobody mentioned Diana's name out loud, yet her shadow hung over every single conversation. As the hours stretched into late morning, wild rumors began spreading everywhere. People talked about heart problems, extreme exhaustion, even poisoning, all of which were quickly denied by palace officials who released a short but firm statement. "His Royal Highness is receiving the best possible care. The Princess of Wales remains by his side." But words couldn't calm the growing anxiety sweeping across the nation. By noon, prayers were being held in churches across London and Edinburgh. Bells rang softly at St. Paul's Cathedral as clergy invited the public to hold the prince and his family in your thoughts. Across the Atlantic Ocean, Prince Harry and Meghan broke their silence. A statement from Montecito read, "Our thoughts are with William, Catherine, and their children. We ask that everyone respect their privacy at this time." Some people saw it as a peace offering. Others thought it was just for show. But it was enough to spark hope that old wounds might finally begin to heal. Inside the hospital, Catherine hadn't moved from William's bedside. She refused interviews, refused food, even refused coffee. "He wouldn't leave me if it were me," she said simply. "So I won't leave him." As evening began to fall, doctors assured her that his condition had improved even more. One nurse, speaking anonymously later, described the moment perfectly. "She just closed her eyes and whispered something like a prayer. It wasn't dramatic, just quiet, steady, full of pure love." Outside, the candlelight vigil continued to grow. People from all walks of life, young and old, British-born and immigrants, stood together side by side, united by one single hope. And across the world, news anchors ended their segments the same way. "Tonight, Britain waits. Prince William's condition remains stable, but the nation holds its breath." If you're watching this from another country, whether it's the United States, Canada, Australia, or anywhere else, how do people where you live see William? Do they see him as just a royal figure, or as a regular man doing his best in an impossible role? Let me know in the comments below where you're watching from and what you honestly think. Because in moments like this, royal titles fade away, but humanity shines through. And tonight, the world is learning just how fragile even the future of a crown can really be. What would you do if someone you loved was in that hospital bed tonight? News of Prince William's hospitalization traveled across the Atlantic Ocean before the day was even over. In Montecito, California, the early morning sun was still climbing above the Pacific when Prince Harry's phone began to ring. It was a private number, one he hadn't seen in many months. When he answered, the voice on the other end was firm but controlled. "Your brother's unwell. It's serious." For a long moment, Harry said absolutely nothing. He simply looked out toward the ocean, watching the waves crash against the shore like a heartbeat he couldn't control. "How bad?" he asked quietly. The line went completely silent. Then the answer came. "Bad enough." Within just a few hours, the Duke of Sussex and Meghan had released their short statement, respectful and carefully worded. "Our thoughts are with William, Catherine, and their children. We ask for compassion and privacy for the family at this time." It was the most diplomatic response the couple had made to any royal crisis in years. But behind that calm public statement, there was real inner conflict. Meghan watched Harry pace back and forth across their kitchen, torn between old resentment and natural instinct. "You should go," she said finally. "He's your brother." Harry hesitated. The years of distance, painful interviews, and public accusations between them felt heavier than ever before. "Would I even be welcome?" he whispered. "That's not the question," Meghan replied gently. "It's whether you'd regret not going." By evening, Harry had contacted Buckingham Palace through his private secretary. It wasn't a request asking for permission. It was simply a notice. "If the situation gets worse, I'll be on a flight," he said firmly. That message alone sent waves through the royal corridors. The possibility of a reunion between the separated brothers under such tragic circumstances became an instant headline around the world. Could crisis heal the royal rift? Back in London, King Charles was growing impatient with the constant flow of rumors and speculation. At Sandringham, he held a quiet, serious meeting with advisors including Queen Camilla and Princess Anne to decide exactly how much information could be released without causing public panic. "We cannot allow rumor to control the narrative," Anne said sharply. "The people will forgive uncertainty, but they won't forgive silence." Charles agreed completely, but his eyes showed a deeper struggle, the look of a father who had witnessed too much loss in one lifetime. "William was always the one who carried it all so well," he whispered. "He never complained, even when he absolutely should have." Camilla placed a comforting hand on his arm but didn't speak. She recognized this tone, the same one he had used after his mother's passing. In Kensington, Catherine continued her quiet watch by William's side. The doctors now spoke with cautious hope, saying he had responded well to treatment and would need significant time to rest. Yet her relief was mixed with the heavy weight of what might come next: the public pressure, the endless questions, the constant analysis. She knew that one single image, one careless word, could be twisted into a story she couldn't control. And she was exhausted. Meanwhile, in the palace communications office, strategists debated intensely whether to publicly acknowledge Harry's message. "If he flies in, it could be seen as reconciliation," one aide argued. "If he doesn't, it's just another headline about family division." The monarchy was trapped in its own impossible paradox, criticized for openness, criticized for secrecy. As night fell, Downing Street joined the growing chorus of concern. Prime Minister Keir Starmer released a brief statement praising William's unwavering sense of duty and compassion. Parliament observed a full moment of silence. Across the Commonwealth, messages poured in from leaders in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, each one calling William a bridge between the monarchy and modernity. And yet, in all that noise and attention, the most powerful voices came from ordinary, everyday people. Outside the hospital gates, someone had carefully pinned a handwritten note that read, "We don't need a king or prince today, just a husband and father who recovers." That simple sentiment resonated deeply, even with those working inside the palace walls. And Ever the Realist told a close aide, "This might be the moment that reminds us all why we're actually here, not for crowns and ceremonies, but for continuity and family." That night, the television coverage completely shifted its tone. What had started as urgent breaking news was now being treated like a national vigil. BBC anchors spoke in hushed, respectful voices. Even entertainment networks replaced their usual programs with emotional retrospectives on William's life and years of service. In Windsor, Prince George asked his grandmother why so many people were lighting candles outside their home. Carol Middleton, struggling to find the right words, answered gently, "Because your father means a great deal to so many people. And when people truly care, they light candles to show they're thinking of you." Back in Montecito, Harry stared at his phone screen, refreshing news updates every few minutes. Meghan brought him tea and sat beside him in complete silence. "It's strange," he said after a long pause. "No matter how far I go, part of me still waits for him." Meghan nodded slowly. "That's what brothers do," she whispered softly. The ocean outside their window shimmered quietly under the California moon, vast and endless. And in that distance, Harry felt both the crushing weight of separation and the faint, fragile pull of reconciliation. At 2:30 in the morning, London time, a new report reached the palace. William's vital signs had stabilized significantly. Catherine was still right there at his side, holding his hand tightly as monitors hummed softly in the darkness. When the doctor finally stepped out of the room, she allowed herself a breath of relief for the first time in 48 long hours. For the first time in 48 long hours, the monarchy exhaled. But even as hope slowly returned, nobody inside those ancient palace walls could ignore what the world had just witnessed, that for all the grand ceremony, all the power and tradition, the royal family was still just a family, bound not by royal duty, but by love, fear, and fragile forgiveness. And perhaps, just perhaps, this moment of tragedy might become the bridge the brothers had desperately needed all along. Do you think family bonds can truly survive years of distance and pain? By mid-morning on October 25, 2025, Britain found itself united in a rare, almost sacred stillness, a kind of collective pause that went beyond politics, social class, and personal opinion. Television screens across the entire nation glowed with the same calm image: the royal crest against a soft background, and beneath it, a brief update from Kensington Palace. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, remains in stable condition following intensive overnight treatment. He continues to rest comfortably under close medical supervision. The Princess of Wales remains by his side. It was the calmest possible wording for a situation that was anything but calm inside those walls. To the public, the word stable was a lifeline of hope. To those inside the palace, it was an answered prayer. Church bells rang softly across London that quiet morning. At Westminster Abbey, clergy held an unplanned service of reflection, with candles flickering gently beneath stained-glass windows. In villages and small towns across the country, local churches opened their doors wide for silent prayer. One vicar in Norfolk told reporters, "You don't need to be a royalist to feel this. He's someone's son, someone's husband, someone's father." In Edinburgh, the famous Royal Mile fell unusually quiet. Tour guides stopped speaking mid-sentence. Even the bagpipers paused their traditional playing for a respectful moment of silence. The story had crossed oceans quickly, with headlines dominating news broadcasts from New York all the way to Sydney. CNN, BBC World, and Sky News all ran identical lower third banners: Prince William health crisis, global concern for Britain's future king. The monarchy, once viewed as a symbol of unshakable stability, now seemed as fragile as the man who would one day lead it. Inside 10 Downing Street, Prime Minister Keir Starmer met briefly with his closest advisors before addressing the waiting press outside. "Our thoughts are with the prince and his family," he said seriously. "He represents the continuity and compassion that this country holds dear." Political rivals quickly followed his lead, each expressing genuine support, creating a rare moment of unity across party lines. Meanwhile, at Buckingham Palace, King Charles struggled deeply to maintain his composure. "He'll be fine," he repeated to staff members, though his exhausted tone betrayed his true feelings. Camilla gently insisted he rest, but he refused completely. "When you're a father, you don't rest until your child is safe," he said softly. His words were accidentally caught on a nearby microphone and would later circulate widely across social media, touching millions of hearts. Throughout the day, people continued gathering outside hospitals and royal residences, leaving fresh flowers, handwritten cards, and heartfelt notes. Some messages were simple: "We love you, Wills." Others were more profound and emotional: "You've carried the nation for so long. Now, let us carry you." The railings of Kensington Palace Gardens became a beautiful tapestry of handwritten prayers and well wishes. At exactly noon, the BBC aired a special emotional broadcast titled "The Prince and the People." It replayed carefully chosen footage of William over the years comforting victims of terrible floods, laughing joyfully with children, planting trees for the environment, and warmly embracing war veterans. The narrators spoke softly about his deep commitment to service and his mother's lasting legacy. Viewers openly wept watching from their homes. Phone calls flooded helplines and online message boards. Complete strangers consoled each other as if the illness had struck within their own families. Inside the hospital room, Catherine sat quietly by her husband's side, reading the flood of messages aloud in a trembling, emotional voice. "They're praying for you in Glasgow, in Toronto, in Nairobi," she said softly. "You'd tell me not to make a fuss, but darling, they truly love you." A nurse standing nearby later said it was the very first time she'd seen the princess smile since the entire crisis began. And while the public anxiously waited for more news, a quieter, more personal story was unfolding behind tightly closed doors. Prince Harry had quietly booked a seat on a British Airways flight directly to London. Meghan stayed behind in California with their children, offering calm reassurance to the press that her husband's decision was purely a family matter. It wasn't clear at all if William would even be awake when Harry finally arrived. But the gesture itself, crossing an ocean of distance and painful history, mattered deeply to everyone watching. That afternoon, Westminster Cathedral hosted a national vigil attended by both political and faith leaders from across the country. Archbishop Justin Welby led the solemn prayer. "May the Lord strengthen his servant William, that he may return to his family and to his calling, renewed in spirit and body." Cameras caught several attendees quietly wiping away tears during the service. As daylight slowly faded, London's iconic skyline transformed beautifully. From the London Eye to Tower Bridge, famous monuments glowed in soft blue light, the color long associated with the prince's passionate environmental initiative. "It's not just about him as a person," one emotional onlooker told ITV News. "It's about what he truly stands for: kindness, duty, decency." In the Royal Communications Room, exhausted aides watched the world collectively hold its breath. "We've seen the country mourn before," one whispered quietly. "But this feels completely different. They're not mourning a tragedy that's happened. They're guarding a hope that still lives." As the clock struck midnight, the hospital remained under extremely tight security. Catherine still absolutely refused to leave his side, sitting with a quiet determination that reminded everyone watching of Diana's own strength. Her unwavering presence had become the entire family's anchor in the storm. Outside, the gathered crowd sang softly together, "God save the King." Their voices faded into respectful silence, as if willing that collective strength to somehow reach the man lying inside. And somewhere between all the prayers and the flashing camera lights, the nation quietly realized something truly profound. In its deepest moment of uncertainty, it had somehow found unity once again. For Britain, the monarchy had always been fundamentally about endurance through centuries of change. And tonight, endurance wore a woman's name and beat with a man's heart that, mercifully, was still strong. When did you last see your country come together like this? The night of October 25th slowly slipped into the early hours of the 26th with a strange, almost eerie stillness. Outside King Edward VII Hospital, the candlelight vigil had dimmed down to just a few dozen people standing quietly beneath umbrellas, their breath visible in the cold morning air. The reporters had grown tired and hoarse. The cameras, weary from the long wait. But inside those white hospital walls, something miraculous, small and fragile, but unmistakable, was quietly unfolding. At exactly 3:17 in the morning, a monitor suddenly beeped with a stronger, steadier rhythm. Prince William stirred slightly. His hand twitched, then slowly tightened around Catherine's. The nurse on duty glanced up sharply from her station and froze for a heartbeat before calling out softly, "Your Royal Highness!" Catherine looked up instantly, her eyes wide with disbelief and hope. The doctor rushed into the room quickly, checking vital signs, whispering something that made her hand fly to her mouth in shock. "He's waking up," he said quietly. She leaned forward immediately, tears breaking silently down her face. "William," she whispered desperately. "It's me. You're safe now." His eyelids fluttered open slowly, unfocused at first but aware, and the faintest smile ghosted softly across his pale lips. It lasted only a few precious seconds before exhaustion pulled him back under. But that tiny flicker was more than enough.